Hey everyone, how's it going? Thanks so much for the invite to give a talk at Plurality Tokyo. Looks like it's going to be a really fun event. I wish I could be here. I think that the vibes are going to be really high, and I'm really excited about this idea of creating an active and sustainable community of people who are experimenting with plurality. I mean, wow, just seems like such a great event. Thanks so much again for inviting me to give a talk. The title of my talk today is Making Pluralism Practical. It's going to be about my experiences with quadratic funding and making pluralism practical during my work as the founder of Gitcoin. So maybe I will start off with why plurality matters to me. And I think that I can't express it better than Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, one of my favorite science fiction series. So this quote from Gene Roddenberry goes, "An infinite diversity and infinite combination represents a Vulcan belief that beauty, growth, progress all result from the union of the like and the unlike. Concord as much as discord requires the presence of at least two different notes. The brotherhood of man is an ideal based on our learning to delight in our essential differences as well as our learning to recognize our similarities. The circle and the triangle combine to produce the gemstone in the center as the union of words and music creates song, or the union of marriage creates children." I wish I was that articulate, but I'm a software engineer, and the poetry and the beauty, I think, of pluralism is best left to artists and storytellers. So I'm going to talk about realizing this vision in the 21st century in the information age with quadratic funding. That is what my talk is about today, and let's get into it. So for those of you who do not know, I am Kevin Owocki. I am the founder of Gitcoin, which is a crowdfunding platform that has funded $50 million worth of plural public goods, and I'm going to get into what we've learned about making pluralism practical during my time at Gitcoin. But just so you know, I have disaffiliated from Gitcoin leadership. I was the founder of Gitcoin, and from 2017 to 2022, I was its CEO. But since then, it's got a DAO structure, and so it's got a plural decentralized governance structure that is running it now. So I am the founder and the fire starter of Gitcoin, but there are many smart people out there who are running Gitcoin now, and I'm so proud to have passed it along to them. So show of hands, I'm wondering how many of you all have heard of quadratic funding, which is the primary mechanism behind Gitcoin. Quadratic funding is based off of a paper by Vitalik Buterin and Zoe Hitzig and Glenn Weil, a flexible design for funding public goods. And I'm going to talk about why it's so powerful here. So every quarter on Gitcoin, $1 million worth of funding is put into a matching pool. And then what happens is that contributions are accepted from the crowd to that matching pool. And they are... the matching pool matches contributions from the crowd in such a way that if two projects raise the same amount of funding, but project one has way more funding from a broader base of contributors, then it's able to get more of the matching pool. And what's really powerful about this is that a $1 contribution or a $10 contribution can result in $100 or $1,000 worth of matching. And that gets people off their butts and gets them contributing to their favorite public goods. The number of contributors matters more than the amount funded. This pushes power to the edges away from whales and central power brokers and creates more democracy in how public goods are funded. And public goods are good. We want to create a dense preference map of what the plurality of our communities want to fund with public goods, and that is the power of quadratic funding. So we've been making pluralism practical by implementing quadratic funding in the real world on Gitcoin grants. Okay, so let's get into the agenda of my talk. I'll talk about the thesis behind my talk. I'll talk about the experiments that we're doing, and then we'll end with a call to action. So the thesis behind my talk is that with the right tools, pluralism is practical. I'm going to share my journey with Gitcoin and pluralism being practical there. And then I would challenge you all to build your tools to make pluralism practical. So let's talk about the experiments that Gitcoin has done making pluralism practical. So Gitcoin grants. A need that we saw in the Ethereum ecosystem was the ability to create more scalable and democratic funding for the Ethereum ecosystem. And the result that we've seen is that over 3,000 projects have been funded on Gitcoin, over 15 rounds of quadratic funding, and $50 million in results have been created during this time. So we made pluralism practical with Gitcoin grants. And we've been iterating towards a global maxima of how much funding we can distribute in the most legitimate way by going through an OODA loop. So when you want to make pluralism practical, you want to observe what your community is doing. You want to orient how you want to change the mechanism in the site. You need to decide what changes to deploy to your product, and then you act, and then you measure the results, and then you spin the loop all over again. So this is an iterative approach to making pluralism practical. Over 15 quarterly rounds of Gitcoin grants, we were able to just deploy $50 million, and each round was more pluralistic and practical than the last. In 2019, we realized that people needed an easy way to host a quadratic vote. Quadratic voting and quadratic funding are the same thing. It's just that one you vote with vote credits and one you vote with actual tokens or dollars. And in 2019, we realized that people needed an easy way to host a quadratic vote. So we launched quadraticvote.co, which is a site where you can host a quadratic vote. And we've seen hundreds of quadratic votes hosted, helping communities figure out which values in their pluralist community are the most important. In 2020, we realized that downtown Boulder businesses in Boulder, Colorado, my hometown, had seen 99% of their foot traffic decrease because of the pandemic. And we were able to raise a quadratic funding round that delivered $50K in results to 5 different businesses downtown: a comic book shop, a yoga studio, a bookstore, and other downtown businesses outside of the crypto niche. And we were able to show that democratic, pluralistic funding is viable if we deploy quadratic funding to our downtowns. In 2021, we did an experiment with Open Collective to fund open source software with quadratic funding, and was able to deliver $100,000 in results over one round to 100 different Web 2 packages. Open source software is a really important public good to our digital infrastructure, and we were able to fund it using quadratic funding because with the right tools, pluralism is practical. So, Gitcoin grants, the primary product that we worked on at Gitcoin, and then all of these side projects that made pluralism practical over the years: Downtown Stimulus Fund OSS and quadraticvote.co, were able to show how pluralism could become practical with the right tools. Now we're working on a tool called Simple Grants for Web 2, which is a clean and well-documented code base that will allow us to run reusable quadratic funding experiments starting with US dollars. But because it's a modular, reusable code base, we could also fork it and build in payments in any currency, including the Japanese currency, including cryptocurrencies, and any currency that is out there. And that'll be launching sometime this quarter. With the right tools, pluralism is practical. I'm no longer at Gitcoin, like I said, but Gitcoin is working on a grants protocol for Web3, a clean, well-documented, reusable, decentralized, and modular code base to run quadratic voting and quadratic funding experiments that is launching. Well, actually, the alpha launched in Q1 of 2023. There's going to be a round in April 2023 showing that with the right tools, pluralism is practical. So you can start to see the evolution of doing quadratic voting and quadratic funding in the Gitcoin and supermodular ecosystem from this talk. And so I want to talk about my call to action for you, Plurality Tokyo. So we've got a bunch of open research problems. If you are a data analyst, then I would love to have you reach out to me. My email is down in the bottom of this slide, kevin@supermodular.xyz. And I could use help if you have a public good in which you want to run a plural quadratic funding campaign. Please reach out to me. I would love that. Gitcoin or Supermodular can do quadratic funding for your ecosystem with any payment method you would like to see. Gitcoin can run it for you, or you can fork the code and run it yourself. Each campaign is about 2 weeks of prep, 2 weeks to run, and 2 weeks to close out. And that's really all it takes in order to run a public goods funding, plural funding project in your community. So this has been my talk for Plurality Tokyo 2023. With the right tools, I believe that pluralism is practical. And I'm really excited about this idea that when pluralism is practical, we'll have reached the quadratic lands. This is a mimetic Schelling point that we've set back when I was at Gitcoin around what would be true. What would the world look like if we have rewritten the laws of economics to build plurality in at the base? If we could rewrite the laws of economics to have crowdfunding and distributed collective intelligence, making sure that our commons are funded and we could all work for the open internet. So this is what we call the quadratic lands back in my days at Gitcoin. And I think that when pluralism is practical, then we'll have reached the quadratic lands. And when we're building tools to make pluralism practical, we are building an arc to take us to the quadratic lands. So this has been my talk for Plurality Tokyo 2023. I really wish that I could have been there, but it's just not possible with childcare and travel and everything for me. My challenge to you in the audience is reach out if you want to work with me, Kevin at supermodular.xyz, and I challenge you to build tools to make pluralism practical in your own community. I really enjoyed the chance to talk to you, and I hope to be invited to attend IRL in 2024. Great to see you. Cheers.